Let's look into the cost of living crisis 2023 today. We've had a lot going on over the last couple of years with the pandemic into the energy crisis. And what we're really focusing on now is the cost of living crisis that really is impacting us all. And ultimately, this comes through the inflationary measures that we've been through as a country, which I'll go through in a moment, but it's really caused by two key things: a trade deficit in the country and the impact of operating that way, and of course the supply chain issues, which causes a squeeze leading to the massive inflation rates that we have right now. Inflation right now is apparently 10.1%. I don't know about you, it feels a lot higher than that. But the way to think about it is, let's say it's really about 12%, which recently it was, by the way, so good news, it's starting to come down and level off. But 12%, it's like having £100,000 here. And then imagine Alex goes from behind the camera once a month with his grubby little hands, takes £1,000, puts it in his pocket. And then the next month comes along, takes another £1,000. Now, the thing is, because it's in the bank, and you don't literally see, oh, the bank's taken £1,000, oh, the bank's taken £1,000. We tend to not think about it, but it is just as real as that. Inflation, essentially, is the devaluation of your money. So if it is 12%, let's say 1% a month, it means that what you can buy for £100,000 next month will cost you 101,000, and the next month will cost you 102,000. And that's essentially how inflation works. The reason inflation tends to come about in the most basic form is supply and demand. So that's really the first one we're going to look at, which is supply squeeze. Supply squeeze is really broken down into two key causes. Number one is Brexit. As much as, you know, whether you're a Brexiteer or not, it's massively impacted the ability to get supply into the UK, because actually we just don't have enough locally to facilitate it. And then when transport costs went up dramatically, let's say a crate, for example, went up by £3,000 as a crate. Well, all of the goods that then get shipped over now cost significantly more. The cost of timber went up 42% because of this, as an example, because we import quite a lot of that. But the other thing is, of course, the pandemic, COVID, the big C of the last few years. When a whole country, and in this case, the world, goes into shutdown, it's no small thing. You need to think, if you've got 3 months of demand, let's just say, and everything shuts down for 3 months, those 3 months of demand, like the world actively working, produces that in 3 months. Let's say we then open up. It's not just, 3 months will be ahead of it. How do you suddenly get what the current capacity and 3 months, 90 days worth of demand? How do you even facilitate that? Because you need to think, even if you said, right, you're now going to, I don't know, say 2 hours a day extra for every human being in the world to facilitate it, it would still take you 5 times the amount of time. That means in order to facilitate that 3 months worth of demand, it would take you 15 months at an extra 2 hours working per person in the world to facilitate that, which doesn't happen. Are you going to, every employee, have you been asked as an employee, hey, by the way, for the next 15 months, you need to work 2 hours more? Is that cool? Per day? No? Funny that, isn't it? So in order to get it, you're essentially adding an extra work day. So now everyone works Saturday is the way to really think about it. And that would still take 15 months. So think logically about this. In order to get that back, you would have to double the workforce of the world for 3 months to get back to where we were, which is quite literally impossible. But that's the impact of the pandemic. And then, of course, it doesn't just suddenly switch on, does it? It's not like some people just suddenly get back and go, oh yeah, all hunky-dory. No, systems fall apart. Communication falls apart. In property, we found that with solicitors, mortgage brokers, it's absolutely crazy the impact that it's still having today. And so there is so much demand that's pent up, that's driving this forward because of the, number one, the lack of supply supply of today, but also the supply chain issues that come about from those lockdowns. Linked in with this brings us our other problem, which is the country running at a trade deficit. That sounds really dramatic, right? But what that essentially means is that we import more than we export. Importing is when you are bringing goods and services into the country, and exporting is when you are taking out of the country the goods and services for other people. Now, it doesn't really matter in general, but because we rely on so much as part of those imports, it really dramatically impacts the cost of it all. Here's why. Electric, as an example, has gone up around 55%, sorry. Gas has gone up around 96%. I don't know about you, but how are you fueling your house right now? Yeah, gas and electric too. So that's a dramatic impact. What about the imports of fuel? We really rely on a handful of countries, and when one of those countries is a bit of a dick, Russia, that's going to dramatically impact the cost. And I don't know about you, it was getting bloody expensive running vehicles 3 to 6 months ago. Luckily, we've had a bit of a change, which is amazing and really does help a situation, because can you imagine that on top of everything else? No, neither can I. But the real problem is the currency fluctuations that go on. So we are, the pound, Great British Pound, is a floating currency. What that means is we're proud and we stand alone and we go off our own back, which is great when everything's amazing. And then when the country's not got that much confidence in it, thanks government for over the last 3 to 6 months, then the rest of the world says, you know what, we don't really trust the pound in the same way that we used to. So why does this matter? Well, a lot of the country where we import from is pegged against the US dollar. Now, I'm not saying the US is doing crazy good right now, but probably not as bad as a lot of other countries. So because the US dollar is the world currency, kind of like gold used to be, like US dollar is the world currency, it's probably got the single most confidence from people in a currency that there is. What that means is everywhere where the currency is pegged against the dollar, it goes in line. So if the dollar goes up in value, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. So for example, Australia, Hong Kong, and some other places. So if we are importing from those places where the pound has dropped in value versus the dollar, which it did by about 24%, by the way, because of that little mini budget, then what happens is every time we import something that costs $1, it now costs us 24% more as the pound against it. So say, for example, I'm making these up slightly. Say it was $1.25 per pound, and it's going to cost me $125. So I'm going to spend £100, right? Whereas now, if it's $1.1, again, it's not right now, but if it was $1.1 versus a pound, but there's still $125. Well, £100 is only $110 now. So I now need to make up that shortfall of that $15. Doesn't sound dramatic. What, another £10 or whatever it is? Not that big of a deal. Well, times that by about 650 billion. And let's see how you feel then. So this crisis we're actually towards the tail end of it. And the good news is, it's actually all predicted. And I know that doesn't really help, but the media out there, I absolutely hate it. We make the mistake of thinking the news is to inform us. If you ever are confused about what the commodity is, it's you. You and your attention is what's getting sold. So yes, there is information in the news, but actually it's massively sensationalized to sell more papers, to sell more ad space, etc. Just like Facebook, it's there to sell your attention to businesses that are willing to pay for it. So the reason I'm saying this is often we look at the newspaper like it's like, oh my God, this has happened. I can't believe the interest rates rose. Yep, we knew they were months before. It was predicted. The Bank of England were open about it. And yet the newspapers make it out like it's some huge shock to the world. That's because you're ill-informed. And actually, I'd rather be ill-informed rather than misinformed. Okay? And that's the problem with newspapers. It's not having no information. It's having the wrong information in the first place. But because it's in writing, we believe it a lot more, right? So the reason it's important is the good news is we are on the back end of it. So it was predicted from April 2021 to April 2023, the average person is going to have to spend about £3,000 more on their household. Now, That is hard. And I promise you, if you're a millionaire, it hurts. If you are on benefits, it hurts a bit more, of course. But ultimately, the key thing is a change in the living standard. I've been telling my team now for the last year and a half, you need to expect your standard of living. And if you compare it to, I'll compare it to when I was a kid. I don't know about you, but nowadays, I mean, I've got George in the office that absolutely loves his Nando's. He'll be going like 3 times a week, right? Takeaways, beers, whatever it is. When I was younger, I'd maybe get a takeaway once a month. I'd go out for a meal with the family, maybe once every other month. And I'd go to the Saturday morning pictures once a month. I'd say that was a pretty good upbringing, a pretty sure a good standard. I think during COVID, especially when we were working from home, we got bored. There's so much time, so much distraction. And so we naturally, and we weren't spending things on like car fuel and stuff like that. So people started spending a lot more on eating out, activities and everything like that. And I don't think many people have adjusted. So do I think it is the most tragic thing in the world? No. I think most people are just going to have to adjust their living standard. And yeah, do you know what? Some people might need to get a part-time job on the weekends. That's the reality of it. In the same way, as a business owner, we're having to work harder in order to bring it in. So very similar, working more hours to bring in similar results, right? In terms of living standard. What we do need to be looking at is people at the lower percentages. I'm talking like the bottom 5, 10%, because I think as a country, we need to go into a bit of contribution mode, not thinking about profiteering and everything like that. It's about how are we going to get through this over the next year. So that's my thoughts. Do I think it's anywhere near as dramatic as the media? No, absolutely not. I think it's ridiculous. I think it is one of the single most unhealthy things you can do is watch the news. I genuinely believe that. I would rather be completely ignorant than misinformed. And I was just talking about this earlier with Alex, actually. And we were saying that, you know what, the really important things you hear about because people talk about it, okay, and everything that's coming up. The second thing is, do I think the market's going to collapse? No, I think there's going to be a correction for sure. Like we're already in that recession, by the way, but the way the media makes out is like a recession's the worst thing in the world. No, it's not. Think of the last 2 years. Property prices have been going up about 24% over that 2-year period in my areas. That cannot go on. That is crazy. You have to have a readjustment of that and it will be a bloody good thing. So I personally think, well, just so you know, recession's 11 months on average, and we're already about 5 months into that. It's not that big of a deal. We're about to go into the second half of it. Whoop-de-doo. Yes, it's shit. Yes, we need to adapt, but it's going to be absolutely fine, and keeping that stability is key. How much do I think it's going to drop by? About 5%. But the key is 5% from what? Is that 5% today? If it is, okay, so what? It doesn't matter. I'm not looking to sell the properties. I'm holding them for the long term. Is it 5% from 5 months from now? And if it is, okay, I've held all that growth. But think logically, if it drops 5% when I buy a property today, which it doesn't, it kind of goes like that and then comes back up. But if it did drop in 1 month, 5% today, so what? That's the last 4 or 5 months of growth anyway. So all that happens is it goes down and then comes back up. Now, I'm not saying these things aren't to be concerned about. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered doing a video. But the key things that we need to do is just understand that our standard of living is going to shift. And that if we want to maintain the same standard and you're just about covering that right now, you probably are going to need to work longer hours, maybe get a second job and work harder ultimately. That's just the way it is. So the reality is some areas are going to get harder than others, and bringing this back to property, it's really about selecting it. The best tip I could give you is look at the average house price in the UK, about 290,000. I'm not say go for the 40 grand properties out there because they're 40 grand for a reason, right? But if you can buy a property relatively under that, let's say 100 grand under plus, so around that 100 grand to 180 grand mark, everything moves towards the average. So the ones that are under that get impacted the least. Those 100 to 180 grand properties, when properties go down, the investors and buyers at the higher level come in and buy at that lower level. So I'd stay away from the really high-end market. Anything significantly above 500,000, London properties are going to get hit the most. But if you're looking to invest in property and you actually just want to get educated on where the best areas are, how to take advantage of this situation from a financial perspective, then put education in the comments if you're looking for paid for education. Hopefully you get massive value from the YouTube channel, and please do carry on subscribing, liking, hitting the notification bell. But if you want to take this further and get bespoke training around you and helping you develop, then the team can talk to you about that. So put education in the comments, and of course I'll put a link in the description too.